Hey, PSA listeners, thanks for downloading this episode. If you enjoy the work I do, please consider becoming a paid member at paranormalskepticacademy.com/membership or at patreon.com/PSA. You will get extra member-only episodes and early access to each new episode at the $2 a month level. If you can't become a paid member, please subscribe to the YouTube channel Skeptic Academy, share the show on social media, and leave a review on your podcast website of choice. Thank you for the support. Now on with the show. Greeting PSA listeners, this is a special 50th episode edition of Paranormal Skeptic Academy, and in this episode I brought on good friend and fellow podcaster Phil from The Weekend Out to help me review one of the most despicable and egregious paranormal reality shows of all time, Ancient Aliens. And in this special episode, they aim their sights directly at the scientific process itself and try to undermine it at every opportunity. Normally when I do these episodes, we have a good time and we poke fun at the people on our screen, but this episode was no laughing matter because it hit at the heart of what we all hold dear to us, and that's the scientific process. So you'll have to excuse and forgive me for the language I used during this episode. There was some explicit words used throughout, so if you normally let kids listen to this podcast, I suggest you skip this one and listen to it with headphones on. But trust me, it'll be worth it. Welcome to a special PSA. I am celebrating my 50th episode of this podcast, even though there are way more episodes than that. You can check the archive. And to help celebrate this milestone, I brought back my friend and fellow skeptical podcaster, Phil from the Weekend Out podcast. Phil, welcome back once again. For a special episode like this, it requires a special paranormal reality show, and I couldn't think of nothing better than Ancient Aliens. And the title of this Ancient Alien episode is The Science Wars. And now to give you listeners a gist of this episode, pretty much is that mainstream science refuses to entertain these crackpots, and their crackpot hypotheses. So they say science is afraid of their truth. Phil, we've already watched this episode. You've watched it several times. I've watched it several times. Can you sum up what you saw in one word or possibly one sentence?
Biased. I think that about does it. Yeah.
That is a great one. I can sum it up like this. I'm going to use a sentence, and it may be a little bit of a run-on, but we're not doing an English paper here. A bunch of crazy people got together and said aliens did something to our planet a long, long time ago, and mainstream science said, get the fuck out of here. And now they're butthurt. They're not being taken seriously.
Show me on the doll where the alien touched you. Yeah.
Tell me on the doll where science touched you. Because apparently they have a huge grudge with science. Now, normally, we've done this in the past before. Kenny Biddle, yourself, and me, we did a Finding Bigfoot episode, and we had a good laugh and it was fun and we're joking around, kind of making fun of how goofy they were and some of the stuff they believe in. But after watching this, I can't say that I had fun with this episode.
No, it pissed me off as
yes,
because there are some kind of supernatural paranormal shows that I can watch and kind of just let myself go and enjoy it. But I think it's kind of like a twofold insult. And part of it is because it's on the History Channel and you would expect more from the History Channel. And then just in general, the way that they don't offer an opposing viewpoint, the way it's just this one-sided, irresponsible, unchecked festival of BS.
I agree wholeheartedly because it's one big circle jerk, pretty much.
Yeah.
Is what they're doing. And it's so blatant what they're doing that it baffles my mind that they've had 12 seasons. of this show.
That's depressing. I can't believe the show's
That is
been on
extremely
that long.
depressing. And do you know what's even worse with the recent declassification of the DoD UFO files, which I think was like one fucking video? They probably got another 6 seasons worth of stuff to do now. And it's all going to revolve around this anti-science, this biased viewpoint that they have. And if you sit down to watch an Ancient Aliens episode, I highly suggest that you have a search engine open, because you're going to need it. And I use it frequently. And not to spoil anything, but almost everything they talk about is easily verified and debunked.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that as we watch the episode. So without further ado, unless you have anything else to say before we start, we are going to start Ancient Aliens Science Wars.
All right.
You know, I wonder if there's many veterans of the Science Wars.
All those poor veterans of the
those
Science
poor vets.
Wars.
So forgotten. PTSD and everything. It's terrible. It's terrible. All right, here we go.
I cannot wait to see this.
Pretty amazing.
Waiting for a long time.
I mean, it's almost unheard of.
Crazy-haired alien guy is who I call him.
I think that's what they were talking about, his hair.
Incredible.
I can't wait to see this. It's unheard of.
Freaky. It's odd, right?
What's in the box, Phil? What's in the damn box?
What's in the box?
Being dismissed by scholars. This object had a date of 140 million years. Is our scientific process flawed?
No.
Scientists are
What's with the dinosaur?
to put a period at the end of the sentence.
Because that's
And this
sciencey.
is a problem.
Will we be forced to rewrite our
It's an
history
alien
books?
space chicken.
We
are
seriously,
undeniable.
right?
We are not alone.
Well, we rewrite history books all the time.
Human-like
That's
groups have been
how
visiting
science
us
works.
all along.
This guy.
Looks amazing.
Why did they come? That's kind of biased there. What did they? Well, no. Do we know they came?
Where did they
They
go?
Like, peace out, bitches.
We banged your women and we're leaving.
That's right. The Science Wars.
New York City,
Location?
February
Earth.
2017. At New York University, Giorgio Tsoukalos meets with art collector Jared Collins, who is in
Scientific
possession
expert.
of a 2,000-year-old elongated skull.
Oh, wow. That is fantastic.
The skull
Are you familiar with these elongated skulls?
Oh, yeah. Just because I'm a documentary junkie and I used to watch a lot of documentaries on Central and South American peoples and stuff like that. So, yeah, I guess this is kind of a global phenomenon where people will use planks or boards or, you know, they'll bind the skull of a child in different ways in order to intentionally deform it or elongate it.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, okay.
is incredibly well preserved.
Go ahead.
Exactly.
And Jared is having it tested at the university to find out if it might possibly contain abnormalities that indicate it is something other than human. He agreed to meet Giorgio outside of the anthropology lab
In
for
an
a
undisclosed
first look
location.
At the skull.
So how did this come to be in your possession?
Well, it's not actually mine. It is on loan to me. Me and one of my colleagues contacted a museum, and we asked them, do you have an elongated skull
Which
in
museum?
your collection? And they said,
Well,
they
in
have
that
this one.
question,
This
have
one.
you ever asked someone that? Do you have an
And have they
elongated
told you
skull in
anything
your
about it?
possession?
I know, right?
Like the provenance?
Strangely, this has been in storage for decades. They have never tested it. They had very little information on it. They know it's absolutely Paracas.
So this skull was found
That's
in the
Peru,
Paracas
right?
region
I
of
think
Peru.
so, yeah.
That's right. But
Giorgio
no
just told us.
real modern testing has ever been done on this.
Oh,
Georgie
this is
boy.
amazing. So, let's go, right? Okay.
The tension
NYU
builds. What will
professor
they
of
find?
anthropology, Dr. Todd Disotell.
I noticed this guy,
agreed
Dr.
to
Todd,
conduct a
he
forensic
had a
evaluation of the elongated
Bigfoot
skull.
I've seen casts.
medallion
I've
on
never
his
seen
necklace.
one in person.
This guy, I can't believe how he's aged. I've seen this guy in documentaries for a long time now. Remember Monster Quest?
Yep.
I remember they did an episode on vampires and he was in it. He used to have a mohawk, I think.
So would you say that he is a paranormal believer, or how would you classify his?
That's a good question, because I think in the episode I saw on vampires, he did a pretty kind of sober, responsible, kind of scientific take on what was going on, even though there was some batshit crazy in that episode. I think they interviewed a woman who claimed to be a psychic vampire or something like that. But as far as he was concerned, I think they interviewed him about something about like the decomposition process or something like that.
Okay.
He
Some
didn't
sciencey
really,
thing.
Yeah, he didn't really go too far off the grid or whatever. But that's funny. You were saying he has a Bigfoot necklace.
Yeah, look at the red medallion on his shirt. At the end of the episode, when he's doing the Skype call, it's exposed. To me, it looks like a Bigfoot, like the walking Patterson and Gimlin film Bigfoot.
Oh yeah, the
classic
profile.
The classic pose. That's what it looked like to me, but I'll point it out when we get to it.
Oh, okay. Well, because you were talking about, whether or not he might be biased in that direction, and I'm sure we're both gonna have something to say about the DNA results.
Yes. Yes, we will.
Quite bizarre.
I can see that this is a relatively young individual.
And how did you determine that, for example?
So by looking at the teeth, we have some deciduous or some baby teeth remaining. It doesn't yet have its third
they
molar, which
alien
typically
teeth?
comes in around 18 years old or so. So I would guess that this is somewhere maybe 12 to 14 years old.
Really?
Let me just move it
Which
over to
kinda
the sterile bench
supports the
surface.
evidence that it was a child who had their head bound.
That's what's very fascinating, besides the shape. The sagittal suture looks like it has completely fused.
If it's an adolescent, maybe 12 years old, isn't that quite young to have a fusions?
It is, but I'm holding it, I'm looking at it.
Okay, now they go on about this for a while. This is like a thread through. I mean, you could play a drinking game every time they say sagittal suture. And I was doing a Google search. And the funny thing is, there was this other skeptic guy who had like some kind of blog or something who did a review of this episode. And he was talking about how it's not unheard of for one of these sutures to fuse in such a way that it almost disappears or something. And what I was thinking myself before I read that was, well, you have this kid who's had their head bound in all sorts of, weird ways, and it's forced to develop and grow and heal probably in an abnormal way because of the binding process. And I was wondering if that could have something to do with an unusual fusion of the sutures too or something. I don't, that's just a layman, thinking out loud, but.
Yeah, no, I did the same search too, and I found an article that discusses it, and in that article when you bind a head like that suture, the one that's on the top of the head that runs from front to back, it will fuse and disappear. Like that's like one of the outcomes of when you do that, when you bind their heads. It says it's rare that it happens, but they see it often enough in these elongated heads that they attribute it to the binding process, where there's enough force and pressure where that suture disappears. Right. And for people who are kind of like wondering what are sutures, it's when your skull forms. There's different plates in your skull, and they form together. As a baby, your head's soft. And as you age, it hardens, and those sutures form. They're like they look like cracks in your skull, but that's where those plates
Like the
form.
bone kind of knits together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this one particular one is missing. So what they're trying to paint their picture of right here is that since it's missing and all humans have this suture, therefore it's alien in origin.
Right.
The sagittal suture is the seam where the two parietal bones of the skull come together. Although the markings may be faint due to fusing over time, all human skulls are expected to have some evidence of this feature. So it is curious that this skull does not, nor do the skulls of a number of other mysterious specimens that have been collected and examined by various experts.
See here, that's the example of where it's expected in those elongated heads because there's so much pressure and force in the way that those sutures come together. So
they're trying to spin it like it's because they're all aliens.
right, there's some DNA manipulation or they're like a hybrid of something that they're aliens, and why would they do this elongated skull thing? So it's we provided a plausible explanation to what they suggest as aliens. Now, I got this question from a listener, and I'm going to ask you this question too. Do you think the voiceover guy believes this crap, or do you think he's just collecting a paycheck, reading what they tell him to read?
That's a great question. I think my guess is he probably doesn't care too much. It's give me that paycheck. But I think it might just be secondary to him. I would imagine whether he believes it or not. To him, I mean, this is his job. But that's a good question though, because you wonder if he doesn't believe it, like if he ever is like tempted to like chuckle or something when he's reading this crap, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's more of like, hey, it's a paycheck. Here you go. Here's what you need to say. Say it. All right. Thanks. Bye.
And then I'm thinking like, because we were talking about being kind of principled or whatnot earlier, and I'm thinking, what would I do if someone offered me like a hefty paycheck to like narrate these specials?
Yeah,
like what would you do?
A real crisis of conscience.
Yeah.
One of the great enigmas of planet Earth is that all over the world we find skeletons with people having these elongated skulls.
For centuries, various native cultures have engaged in the ritual practice of artificially elongating their skulls by tightly wrapping the heads of their children through infancy. However, these skulls still feature evidence of the cranial sutures.
You also have the whole speculation of why people were doing the head binding and the artificial elongation anyway. Why were they doing that? They wanted to have these elongated skulls.
Didn't they just contradict themselves?
The elite.
Explain.
Yeah, because first they were talking about how all the skulls are missing the sutures.
Right.
Then they just said, but these skulls still have their sutures.
Well, see, the ones that are missing are alien in origin, and the one that have them are terrestrial.
Ah, I see.
See,
of course.
Because, but you're missing. You're burying the lead here, Phil. Why were they doing this?
They were emulating these squash-headed aliens or whatever.
Well, let's see what our friends have to say.
The gods, the rulers. And you have to wonder if there was a race here on Earth with these elongated heads, and were they extraterrestrials?
Okay, now that's a good point, right? You have to wonder if ancient aliens somehow influenced cultures of the past. So going back to contradiction. So did they influence them to bind their heads so they could look like our alien overlords? Or are they alien human hybrids because the suture's missing?
Yeah, and I don't even think these jackoffs know exactly what their theory is. And but I have to say, like, I think part of being a good skeptic is not being overly closed-minded because you want to get at the truth. So I had to admit to myself, I'm like, Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's a weird thing to do. Why are disparate cultures around the globe doing this, or why did they do it in the past? But I think, there's probably simpler answers than aliens, were involved.
Really? Simple answers? Aliens is pretty simple.
No, because I'm thinking about other things. I think about like ear and nose piercings, all different types of cosmetic things that people engage in that you don't need to posit aliens in order to explain it. There might be, I don't know what it is, but something, I guess, aesthetically pleasing to ancient people about,
Right. We know beauty differs from culture to culture and over time as well. What we think is beautiful changes. And we don't have any historical writings to explain why these cultures did this. We do know that there are cultures all over the world that did do it. So there was something within those cultures to suggest that this form was either beautiful or symbolized power or something that they did. Now, going back to Occam's razor, right? It's not the simplest answer is the best answer. It's the answer with the fewest new assumptions is usually the best answer, right? So what are our assumptions here? That it's just a cultural thing that these people thought was either a symbol of power or beauty, or do we have to assume extraterrestrial visitors visited our planet thousands of years ago and influenced them? Which one requires fewer assumptions?
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to extracting some tooth and bone powder to get DNA out of that.
Dinner.
Okay. Excellent.
In order to obtain the needed genetic material from the artifact, Dr. Disotell will need to remove a tooth and drill into it to extract the samples. The analysis of the material will determine the sex.
Okay, now this may be nitpicking, but the thesis of this episode is science is bad.
Yeah, and yet they're using science to try to prove their point. Yeah,
exactly.
Ancestral lineage of both the father and the mother, and any DNA anomalies when compared with the current human genetic database.
Looks pretty good. So we will pack this up and send it off, and in 4 to 6 weeks, they should have the result.
4 to 6 weeks, okay.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your input on this.
Take care.
Thanks a lot.
really appreciate it.
For hundreds of years, researchers have been confronted with numerous
Here we go.
scientific anomalies. But traditional science is often intolerant of evidence that doesn't fit
Intolerant.
within
Wait,
Yeah.
traditional science is often intolerant of
Because of
evidence.
these
Really?
Yeah. Let's riff on that for a second here,
Isn't
because
science evidence-based?
it usually doesn't science lead where the evidence takes us. Now there may be a few speed bumps in the road that are probably greatly over-exaggerated through history, but ultimately science is the pursuit of knowledge based on evidence, and it's always progressing forward. Now, I don't know about you, Phil, but being a card-carrying member of the skeptical community, we usually tend to change our minds based on evidence presented to us because that's how science is supposed to work, right? And what they're trying to do to us here is paint science, this ambiguous science, quote unquote science, capital S, as a organization that rejects fringe theories, which on the whole is kind of a good policy to have. You can't take all your limited resources and time and suss out these fringe theories and see if they hold water. You can't do that as a science practitioner. But what they're doing is trying to paint science in a way where, like, look, they're dogmatic. They're not open to new pieces of evidence. Science never changes. It's always one thing after another.
Yeah, it's like I think there probably are times when certain scientists might be too close-minded and maybe dismiss people who come to them with valid evidence or something like that. But generally speaking, I think if you provide a scientist with valid evidence, not just some fanciful story that aliens did it, hopefully they're gonna listen to you and they're gonna let the evidence do the talking, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And we can think of numerous examples where knowledge has progressed because science, as a process, changed the way we look at the world. Up until Einstein, the idea was that our universe was this kind of elastic thing where it would expand and contract, expand and contract. But as time progressed and we got more and more data and more evidence, it suggested that our universe is constantly expanding. It's going to expand, expand, expand. Eventually, it just expands itself out of I wouldn't say existence, but out of life. That's what the universe is going to do. Science changed the common viewpoint at the time. Now, if these guys want to change that viewpoint, they have to present some type of evidence for their views. What they're presenting is just broad speculation and imagination.
That's a great way to put it. That's what this whole series kind of is, broad speculation without any actual substantial evidence.
Or what they'll do is they'll piggyback on scientific discoveries, awesome scientific discoveries, and they'll piggyback on that, and then they'll bastardize it and say that it supports their viewpoint more than it supports what the actual conclusions of whatever the research was.
Prejudices. Could we be missing a greater truth about mankind's origins?
I
think
it.
Scientists need to look at these things and instead of just dismissing it offhand right away, to be like, wait a second, maybe we are not the first. Maybe another civilization did exist. Perhaps there is an extraterrestrial connection because clearly we have a mystery there and everybody's looking the other way.
And that mystery is, it's aliens, dummies.
Yeah. Everyone's looking the other way.
This rural
So here you go.
southern
It's
town
probably
has a population
my
of
favorite
only
part of the show.
2,500, but may hold one of the most incredible archaeological artifacts ever found. At the Creation Evidence Museum is an ancient...
Okay, let's pause this here real quick because
let's try to gloss right over that.
That was quick.
They never mention creationism or, elaborate on that fact or
well, I
think
my opinion is that these guys are creationist, except their gods are aliens and not traditional gods.
Yeah, that's true too. Like aliens as a substitute for God or angels or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's what they are. They're creationists just without the deities.
Hammer, known as the London Artifact, named after the central Texas town where it was discovered in 1936.
The hammer itself was found in the Travis Formation. It's a concretion of sandstone. And it usually takes about 140 million years for this to form. That would put it at 140 million years old.
Mainstream scientists contend that the first modern humans
those icky
emerged
mainstream
only
scientists
200,000 years ago. But if so, how is it possible that such an artifact exists?
So that guy
was scientifically analyzed.
Was supposedly that guy's a geologist.
Yes,
because I was gonna say they're saying that this process of concretion usually takes millions of years. Then I did a quick Google search because I'm like, is that right? And supposedly it's not that abnormal to have it's like a modern object that comes in contact with some kind of old stone, and then a mineralization process takes place where the object becomes partially kind of covered over or almost looks like it's been absorbed into the stone. And supposedly
Right.
it doesn't take that long. This guy, I mean, there might be scenarios where depending on the variables or whatever, it does take millions of years or whatever. But from what I read, I think even from the same area in Texas, there are other examples of objects that where this kind of concretion took place. And it's funny because, I mean, this hammer looks exactly what mainstream people suggest it is. It's a mining implement from the 19th century. And it's like, I don't know, why would there be a 400 million year old hammer that looks just like a prospector's hammer and it's found where prospectors were in the United States?
Well, we gotta examine why they're using this as evidence for their beliefs. So if we step back, Jeff Williams, he is a geologist, but he's also an expert gold finder, and he sells you secrets on how to find gold. Okay, so he's a snake oil salesman, right? So he said this particular hammer was found in a strata layer that was 140, 150 million years old. Okay, this hammer was I don't know if it was discovered or if it's on display at a creationist museum, right? So what are the goals of a creationist museum?
Oh, to basically, well, not only to convince people of what they would say is the truth of the Bible, but the narrative that the Bible, that the human species, the Earth, is only around like 3,000 to 5,000 years old or something like that.
Yeah, the highest estimate 10,000 years old, right? So creationists will use this hammer as an example of saying, look, geologists say this process takes millions of years, even 150 millions of years. But we found this 19th century style hammer in a layer that's 150 million years old. How does that happen? The only way that happens is if the Earth is young.
Yes, so it's kind of the creationist narrative contradicts the ancient aliens narrative.
But they're so vapid that they will use that for evidence of their belief.
And there's a great example of the intellectual dishonesty of the show. They don't even pause to elaborate on the fact that it's at a creationist museum, or one of the labs it was tested by was affiliated with a creationist group or the same museum or whatever. And once again, like our consistent complaint about this show and shows like it, they don't offer an opposing viewpoint. It's just completely one-sided. Not only is it one-sided, they don't even stop to elaborate on what the issues might be with their argument.
Right. It's, yeah, exactly.
In the 1980s by two independent labs, the Creation Science Foundation based in Australia and the Battelle.
By the way, the Creation Science Foundation in Australia was formerly called the Creation Ministries International in Australia. So I wonder what their goals are.
Yeah.
Memorial Laboratory.
I was going to say, what are their findings, the creationist lab there? Like, I think it goes to what you were just saying about how they're trying to prove that the Earth is young. So wouldn't the findings kind of once again be opposed to the ancient aliens hypothesis that,
Well, look here. I can explain it to you very simply. Remember the thesis of this episode is that science is the enemy, right? If science can't even date this hammer correctly, which was what they're trying to say, is that science will say this hammer is a 19th century mining hammer, and the geological process of how minerals dissolve from ancient strata can harden themselves around an object and make it look like the object is from a later time. If they can't even get that right, how can we believe them on anything else they say? So therefore, believe our side of the story, which is aliens did it.
Aliens done did it.
everything. Aliens are responsible for everything.
And I'm just picturing like an alien with like a miner's hat or something. Like that is that the height of their technology? They came with mining hammers.
Right?
Part of the handle actually
they could travel across vast distance of space, but when they get here, they got to use iron hammers to dig or something. It's like they use all their resources to build these interstellar spacecraft, but they can't think of something to dig through ground.
They couldn't like leave behind a sonic shovel or something.
Right? No, it has to be the exact type of hammer that was used at the time period.
Starting to go through a process called coalification. It's where you have inorganic material and organic material changing into coal. This is something that just simply can't happen in the span of, say, 100 years. Like most people saying, oh, this is nothing more than a hammer that was left behind by a would-be prospector from the mid-1800s.
See, now I didn't look that one up, but that's something I meant to do, but didn't have time. I wanted to look up coalification and see how long it actually takes.
Well, here, let me read you an excerpt from an article I found, and it will explain. Quote, however, it was soon pointed out by geologists that minerals dissolved from ancient strata can harden around a recent object, making it look impressive to someone unfamiliar with the geological process. In fact, the style of the hammer would lead us to recognize it as a 19th century hammer from definitely of American province. So basically what that is saying is that the way certain geological formations form can give the appearance, what we already discussed, that this hammer is from 150 million years ago.
Right, but it seems like they're talking about two different processes. You have concretion, which we already talked about, but then they're saying coalification too. Something like the handle of the hammer seemed like it was actually turning into a coal-like substance, and they're saying that takes a super long period of time too. And I'm wondering, like,
I would think it's the same process as the other thing you mentioned, the
concretion.
Yeah, I would think it would give similar or misleading data points. It's never mind all that bullshit. Like, why the fuck is there a mining hammer in 150? Like, what's the point? Like, what does that prove? Like, okay, there's a mining hammer from an ancient alien perspective, right? From a creationist, I understand what they're trying to do. They're saying the Earth can't possibly be that old because we found this hammer in this strata that scientists say. But like, from an ancient alien perspective, why is that important to them?
Yeah, it's like the best they could possibly do is say that the aliens taught us how to make mining hammers. That's like, I don't know. Like mining hammers, 4 million. What was it? 400 million? How long ago was it? Something crazy.
150 million years ago.
Jesus.
I missed something that they mentioned earlier, was that they said if modern humans have only been around for 200,000 plus years, give or take, how can they do certain things, whatever. I forgot exactly what they said. But this is another point in fact where science actually has shifted on that based on some recent fossil finds. We found that they push back modern humans hundreds, maybe 350,000 years ago, maybe 400,000 years ago. So recent discoveries in the fossil record have actually pushed back the date of when modern humans evolved on the scene. So that right there just disproves their point that science doesn't want to change or entertain new ideas.
In addition to coalification, the handle of the hammer shows signs of petrification. This process of the organic wood being replaced by mineral crystals takes millions of years. Test results concluded that the material on the hammerhead consisted of 96.6% iron, 2.6% chlorine, and less than 1% sulfur. Incredibly, this material contained no carbon to indicate modern manufacturing.
When we were making steel for tools, part of the process is to use a blast furnace to remove carbon out of it completely, but we always have about 0.2 to 2% left over. There's always a carbon signature on our steel, but there wasn't any carbon whatsoever that was found in this particular material.
So it's
This object may be
alien?
as
It's a
old
high-tech
as
super mining
140
hammer.
million years. And obviously, that's a crazy proposition if you think that modern day archaeology suggests that we've only been around for about 10,000 years, creating stuff with our own hands. So this falls into the category of out-of-place artifacts. Artifacts that shouldn't exist.
again, their thesis is that science gets shit wrong, so therefore science is wrong
Aliens.
and equals aliens.
If the
Yeah.
London hammer really dates back to over 100 million years, as the data suggests, this find would have to fundamentally reshape our understanding of human development on planet Earth.
So they're suggesting
But
humans
ancient
evolved
astronaut
140
theorists
million
suggest
years ago.
There is another, much more substantial relic of the ancient world.
And once again, the Occam's razor type of thing. We know that supposedly, according to mainstream science, that this process, concretion, can happen relatively quickly. And it's not what they're suggesting, where it has to be millions and millions of years to take place. And like I was saying, supposedly what I read, there was even other implements from around this time period, I think, in the same area that also had been subjected to that same process.
Right. Yeah. What they're trying to do, they're trying to undermine science, saying that modern science says that we shouldn't have found this hammer in this location, but we did. Instead of trying to address it, which it has been, we're just going to disregard it and push it to the side because it will disprove what we say is true. That's the case they're building.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, it always comes back to Egypt with these crackpots. It always comes back to Egypt. Every Ancient Alien episode, dollars of donuts that every Ancient Alien episode has something to do with Egypt for the past 12 seasons. Always.
Pyramid of Giza. Giza, Egypt. Here on the west bank of the Nile stands the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Great Pyramid. According to accepted history,
the best pyramid. I tell you what, Egyptians, they built the best pyramids, the greatest pyramids.
2500 BC as a tomb for the pharaoh Khufu. However, the dating of the pyramid and its association with Khufu is based entirely on evidence discovered in May of 1837 by British explorer Richard Howard Weiss.
Colonel Weiss.
So what they're saying with this Weiss guy is saying that, well, he dated it in the 1800s, right? So he can't possibly be right, because what modern scientific hold on, wait, no, that doesn't work. He can't be right because it was so long ago and he didn't have the right equipment that modern science. Okay, no, wait. Science is bad, science is bad, science is bad. How can we fit this into what we believe without saying science helped us do it? It's like the holy trinity of ancient aliens. They're all over the fucking place.
Basically used gunpowder to blast his way into a series of hidden chambers. And at the very topmost of these chambers, he allegedly found, painted onto the stone roof blocks there, the cartouche of King Khufu. Egyptologists were then able to attribute the Great Pyramid to Khufu and the construction date of 2500 BC, because that's when they believe Khufu reigned.
They believe, those evil they.
Since stone cannot be carbon dated, and no other inscriptions,
useless stone,
except for the pharaoh's official monogram, were found on the pyramid, this date has stood relatively unchallenged. However, new evidence that has been found in Colonel Weiss's personal journal has researchers
was a hoax, I tell
questioning
ya.
his discovery. Some have even suggested that he may have forged the name of Khufu himself.
In Vice's private journal, which I
You hear that a lot with Ancient Aliens, is that suggestions say,
I was just going to say, I'm willing to admit that there could be some play in, the dating of the pyramids or things like that. But once again, why does it have to be aliens?
right.
At the end of the day, we have a bunch, impressive stone structures, but stone structures, inscriptions, pictographs of people in loincloths and stuff. Why does it have to be aliens? I don't know.
Well, what they're doing again here is that if you catch the verbiage of the voiceover guy, he's saying this claim that this was Khufu's pyramid dating from 2500 BCE that has gone unchallenged for 100.
Oh, so it's the science
150
wars.
years. Yeah,
once
it's
again.
150 years. It's
They're
going
trying to
unchallenged.
undermine
right.
science.
And
Right.
now that we're challenging it, they're refusing to entertain what we're saying. So let's continue on just a little bit, and I think I have another point to make.
managed to view a couple of years ago, we find contradictions in his private notes. He was desperate to find a cartouche. On this particular night, he writes, there was nothing in the chamber that looked like hieroglyphics. And then, in his published book 3 years later, he writes, we found the cartouche.
After the contradicting evidence was exposed, in 2014, 2 University of Dresden archaeology students smuggled a sample of the paint used in the King Khufu markings and had it analyzed by a German laboratory. The sample was too small for radiocarbon dating, but the technicians were able to determine something shocking. The pigment was not painted onto the original limestone blocks, but a later plaster repair. This finding suggests that the cartouche was not original to the pyramid construction. But
is that true? That's another thing I didn't have time to research, but
all right, let me. Yeah, I looked into it. So, Egyptologists say that this is, in fact, genuine marks, and they have tested it, and they say it's genuine. Also, they don't use one single piece of evidence to date these pyramids. They have multiple lines of evidence to date the pyramids. It's not just this one single piece that they're suggesting. But these guys who broke in illegally, by the way, and chipped away at this ancient artifact and took it to Germany, they're pseudo-historians. They took this illegal sample to an undisclosed German lab. We don't know where it was tested at. Probably another fucking creation lab. And they said they were using new dating methods, meaning untested, unverified dating methods. And they did this to create a documentary, which they did create a documentary about it, about the ancient alien origins of these pyramids. So there's a lot of motivated reasoning behind everything they did.
Yeah.
They gloss over all of that we just listened to, because if they told you the truth behind it, it would completely disprove their thesis altogether and their ancient alien hypothesis in general.
And okay, so that brings me to something that I've been wanting to ask or bring up. So I think I was reminiscing with you and Kenny about the good old days when at least documentaries like this would have opposing viewpoints, or they'd have representatives from both sides. Do you think that when they do a one-sided show like this, Ancient Aliens, that just basically shoves pablum into the mouths of the believers, do you think the sensational nature of it makes these shows more, what's the word I'm looking for? Just more successful or more popular, so that's the reason why they don't have opposing viewpoints on the people who believe in this garbage would rather not have the suspension of disbelief
questioned.
Yeah.
Well, the Ancient Aliens is one of the more popular, from a ratings perspective, shows on History Channel. So there is a motivated reason behind History Channel airing these shows, and they found a formula that tends to work. So even I've been doing this podcast since 2014, regularly since 2015, not on a monthly basis, and I've watched tons of paranormal reality shows, and I would categorize this in that as a paranormal reality show as well. And opposing viewpoints are few and far between. They rarely, if ever, appear on these shows because they are tailoring it to a specific audience that they know will watch it. Now, we don't know what the result would be if they do put opposing viewpoints on. Maybe it'll be a boom and it will strike ratings gold mine, but they won't do it. Why mess with something that's working?
Right. And that's kind of infuriating when you think about, I think I mentioned this before, that you gotta have young, impressionable people, kids coming up watching this type of thing, and there's no balanced perspective. They're just feeding them this garbage, one-sided. Because I remember, like, when I was growing up, how much I liked watching shows like, I don't know, might have been like In Search of or Ancient Mysteries. And if I remember, at least I think even those shows to some degree had a balanced, maybe not as much as I'm remembering. But.
Yeah, no, it's always been there. I watched a documentary on America's Most Haunted Houses from 1996, right?
Oh, wow. Right.
But they did one investigation of a house that I have an upcoming episode on, where Joe Nickel, the paranormal investigator,
the skeptic, yeah.
Yep, they actually showed him going to the place and doing an investigation, but what they showed was very little of what he did, but they showed a whole lot of what the psychic and parapsychologist did. So they were clearly leading you to one conclusion over the other. Even though Joe Nickel had the line of the night where he said, people who believe in ghosts see ghosts, people who don't believe in ghosts don't see ghosts.
Yeah.
Essentially is what he said. But they spent way more time with the parapsychologist and the psychic than they did with Joe. So even then, in the mid-90s, they had some opposing viewpoints, but not enough, I would say, to sway a believer.
It's like, could you even imagine something like that on Ancient Aliens? Like them letting someone in with an opposing view, even for like a minute?
Oh, God, no. They wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it.
Weiss had spent nearly $1.3 million on his expedition to uncover truths about the Great Pyramid. Is it possible that in his desperation to find something, he did the unthinkable, that he may have forged the name of Khufu onto the chamber wall, thereby establishing an inaccurate date for the structure?
That's crazy. So that's all based on these guys who broke in, took a sample without permission, and who are these pseudoscience guys making an Ancient Alien documentary?
Yeah, because they said there was modern plaster. So I've seen a few documentaries on Egypt of these pyramids, not like the mythological stuff, but the actual physical, how they build them and stuff. And they're restored like any other ancient artifact, right?
Yeah.
So they use this plaster to restore certain parts of these pyramids. So just because the ancient the plaster was there from modern times doesn't mean that it was put there, one, to deceive people and to purposely do it. It was put there as a restoration project, which it happens all the time. So even that is faulty in and of itself. So these creeps that broke in to face this ancient artifact probably chipped off a piece of the stone that was near the stamp that had some of this plaster repair on it, and they tested it and said, "Oh, it's from modern times," and they use that as evidence for.
And now the History Channel is pushing their narrative.
Right. And so I'm going to pause here too on what they just said, because they said this guy was so desperate to find evidence of something that he forged this marking to say this was Khufu's tomb. One, how did he know who Khufu was to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. And two, how did he know what Khufu's mark looked like? Because there had to be some reference point, right? Because he'd have to have known what it was to forge it.
Either that, or he would have had to have been so well versed in Egyptian hieroglyphics that he was able to, be familiar with the syntax and be able to put the right characters together. But still, you're right. He must have had some idea of who Khufu, I think in Greek, Cheops or whatever, who this person was. So
right. It also goes to the point of, they're saying this guy was so desperate to prove his point.
Like the ancient alien guys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. That makes sense now. Can't trust anybody who's desperate.
Exactly.
This is not the only evidence contradicting the dating of the pyramid and the entire Giza complex. A 7th century BC text known as the Inventory Stela, unearthed by archaeologists in 1858, details repairs made by Pharaoh Khufu, including work on the Sphinx.
The Inventory Stela begs the question, how, if Khufu was repairing the Sphinx, which was supposedly constructed by his son, how could he be doing that? That would suggest that the Sphinx itself was already ancient at the time of Khufu.
Let me pause here for a second. Let's start with this Inventory Stela. Now, let me read from Wikipedia, the source of all knowledge. The credibility of the Inventory Stela is viewed by historians and Egyptologists with great caution. The text contains many anachronisms, and its elaboration is poor. To the scholars, it is obvious that the stela was a purposeful fake created by the local priest with the attempt to certify the Isis temple and as ancient history, and ancient history it never had.
Huh. Okay, so it is an ancient Egyptian artifact, but it was made by priests who had a kind of ulterior motive or whatever.
Right. So what they're saying is that the Sphinx was built by Khufu's son.
Mm-hmm.
But in this Inventory Stela, it said the Sphinx,
Khufu's repairing.
Right. It said it was built before Khufu's reign.
Right, and he was doing a restoration to it or something like that.
Right, exactly, right. And I watched a cool thing on the Science Channel about how the Sphinx was made. It was actually carved into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So they worked with it was like a flat piece of ground, and they carved down to the chin and the chin down.
That's insane.
It was carved down, and they were able to figure out, because it was not just the Sphinx. There's a temple around it as well that was built, and so what they did is they were able to figure out that the chisel marks and the way the stone that was used to build the temple matched up perfectly to where it was chiseled out around the Sphinx.
Oh wow!
And so they chiseled the stone away to build the Sphinx's body, and they used that stone to build the temple, and those stones match up perfectly, like a puzzle piece.
And I think that's the incredible thing. It shows you what humans are capable of when they're motivated enough. You know what I mean?
Right. And you got to think too, like we think with our modern concept of heavy machinery, it's like, we could probably build a Sphinx in 6 months, and they did it in Las Vegas.
Right.
But they're still the same evolved humans that we are today, and they used the technology of their day. They took years to build this stuff. We just can't fathom that on our time scale that someone would devote decades to building something like this.
Yeah, it almost seems alien to us. We just don't have the dedication or the patience, I think, because we haven't needed it.
Right.
Because of all our technological innovation.
Right. And so what they're trying to do here is they're trying to say that this inventory stela, which no historian or Egyptologist takes it as what it says on there as literal, because it's a known fake. This priest was trying to assign their temple, the Sphinx's temple. It's a particular temple they built, a more ancient origin to give it more authority over what was currently at the time. Saying, look, our shit's older, so it's better.
Right.
And so what they did, they forged this stone to say that it was built before Khufu's time, even though it was built by his son after Khufu's death. So what ancient aliens are trying to do is they're trying to say that we have this stone contradicting what historians say, even though historians say this stone is inaccurate.
So the whole thing is, I'm definitely seeing the point you were making, that they're basically just trying to undermine mainstream science.
Exactly.
Right?
With anything.
Even
anything.
if they can't prove how aliens were supposedly involved, it's their goal in this episode is to undermine science. It's
right. And so why did they use this as an example, right? They use it as an example because it contradicts what the historians and Egyptologists and archaeologists say. It undermines science, even though what they're using is disregarded as accurate by those same archaeologists, Egyptologists, and scientists.
Could the dating of the entire Giza site be wrong?
No, it's not.
In 1992, Boston University geologist Robert Schoch created a stir
see
among
those
Egyptologists when he suggested that
those
based
tiles
on
the background
evidence
right
of
there?
water erosion at the Sphinx enclosure,
those are
he would date
constantly
the site
restored
to
because
approximately
the Sphinx is eroding.
10,500
Right.
BC.
And so they use
immediately without even
period
seeing my evidence,
plaster,
they start
but
going, it doesn't go
built
back that far.
mixed today.
I was talking about
to-
real
to
evidence,
repair that.
real science, which they simply did not want to hear because it did not fit their preconceptions.
I remember this guy, Robert Schoch and Anthony West. I remember those guys going way back to really controversial views on the age of the pyramids and the Sphinx.
So this guy, this is the same documentary I watched where they told you how the Sphinx was built. There's some grain of truth to what he's saying. The Sphinx is eroding from water.
Right.
It has to be constantly repaired, and the head, the part of the Sphinx head where you see it comes down its neck.
Right.
That wasn't original to the Sphinx. That was put there as a support because the head was falling off. So that part of the Sphinx isn't original. It was put up there to keep the head from falling off because it's constantly being repaired. What was in this documentary was water is causing it, but the Sphinx was built out of limestone,
right?
And limestone acts as a sponge for water.
And
so what it's doing is it's drawing groundwater up from underneath, and then it's depositing out of the Sphinx, and the Sphinx just sucks it up like a sponge, and that's what's causing
the erosion.
It's erosion.
Okay.
Now, what this guy is proposing is that the erosion was caused by
flooding,
massive deluge of rain.
Yeah.
But how can Egypt get so much rain when it's an arid desert where it gets like 1 inch a year? So
it must
he's
have been
saying
so long ago when the climate was vastly different.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because the climate was vastly different 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 years ago.
Right.
It was. That's what he's trying to paint. Again, it's not like, oh, this is evidence of aliens. This is evidence that science is wrong.
Right.
Are willing to admit. But if so, just who built it?
According to Arabian writers,
This guy.
Ibrahim al-Makrizi,
Anakin.
the Great
Chariots of the
Pyramid
Gods.
was not constructed by Khufu. The Great Pyramid was constructed long before the Great Flood by
Not
a
true.
king with the name of Saurid.
Now, Phil,
Yeah.
for someone who is well versed in religion as you, when someone says the Great Flood, what do you think they're talking about?
Some kind of mythical deluge or something like that. Like makes me think of the Noah narrative or the Epic of Gilgamesh, that type of thing.
Right. So, like the world was flooded by God because he wanted to kill all the humans, is one example.
Right.
And they want us to take them seriously, and their evidence is a global flood that there's no evidence for.
And then the old Arabian writers clearly say Saurit is the same figure which the Hebrew society calls Enoch.
Oh, biblical connection.
Enoch was
Yeah, they
taken
love
up into the
Enoch,
heavens
too.
by the
Oh,
archangel
they love him.
Michael. He was told by the angels of a coming cataclysm.
Oh, so your evidence
And he was
is
instructed
the
to
Bible.
build the Great Pyramid
Gotcha.
as a repository for the knowledge that he not only learned in heaven,
Gods
but
and
all
alien.
the earthly knowledge.
It's like Ben
as well.
Carson who says the pyramids were used to store
Perhaps
grain.
these were
Store
otherworldly
grain,
beings,
yeah.
described as angels. Maybe everything we know about Egyptology is wrong.
No,
And we have
everything
to
you
go
know about it
back
is
and-
wrong.
And open up our
Right.
imagination.
Even though you
to the
got that scarab
possibility
on your neck.
that there's another explanation that in fact involves the assistance
Oh.
of extraterrestrials in the
Oh,
creation
look at that
of the Great
flying saucer. The pyramids were...
In November 2015, researchers at Giza scanned the Great Pyramid using thermal
Docking
cameras.
station.
There you go,
and
that's what I'm
found
talking
two
about.
anomalous areas. They submitted a request to the Department of Antiquities to do a more formal investigation in hopes of locating what they believe might be hidden chambers. As scientists continue to discover new finds at the site, might they stumble upon the evidence that supports the ancient accounts?
Again, scientists are discovering new things that's changing how we view ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
But science never changes? I'm confused. I'm confused.
After all, this has happened before.
Oh.
With the unearthing of a once mythical land.
Now here comes the real evidence.
Oh, they go into Troy and all that.
Yeah.
Hizerlik, Turkey, 1870. This small village is the site of one of the most sensational discoveries of the 19th century, the legendary city of Troy. The city was the infamous location for the Trojan War described in the classic Greek epic, the Iliad. Prior to its discovery by amateur archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann,
Amateur.
Troy was
Just like our
considered to
ancient
be
alien
a
friends.
mythical location.
Yeah.
They're comparing
Heinrich
themselves.
Schliemann, a German businessman
They're comparing themselves
and
to
pioneer,
this guy.
read Homer's Odyssey and the Iliad, and he became convinced that Troy existed
That it was aliens?
somewhere in Turkey, where it's placed within the story. So he went out to Turkey.
That's just how
and
we
he
found
asked the locals
Noah's
out
Ark
there
too, right?
what they knew about the legend.
Because the Bible
And
said
they
it was on Mount
eventually
Ararat, so we
pointed
found
him
it
in
there.
the direction of a huge mound. So here he dug, and he found
Here's
the lost
evidence of a
city
mound.
Troy itself.
And aliens are involved.
In
How?
addition to Troy, other
Yeah,
cities
exactly.
that were previously relegated to the realm of mythology have also been discovered to be real. The
Like.
Mediterranean Sea, 2000.
So, like, these are really cool
Discoveries.
discoveries. Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's cool. We found Troy. We found this buried Egyptian port. Like, that's cool stuff. They're using the discoveries of scientists and archaeologists to bolster their claims that scientists and archaeologists are frauds.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like maybe if you found like I don't know, I don't know, like something that looked like an Apple store down there or something filled with glowing, flashing lights or something. Maybe.
Right.
A group of divers working off the Egyptian coast near Alexandria discovered the submerged ruins of statues and even entire temple complexes.
One instance
Cool.
of the discovery of something that we thought was legendary was the discovery of Heraklion, Thonis.
Like this guy, does he believe this crap, or was he
We had
just
read
some
about this
guy
in
that got to talk
Greek
about
myth
this
and
cool
Greek
discovery?
histories, but we had no evidence.
That guy
for it.
looks familiar,
And
but I
then
don't
one
know
day,
much about
it
him.
gets
It
discovered.
says-
Yeah, they probably all pop up on
Dating
these
back to the
shows.
7th
Probably
century
only the ones
BC,
willing to go on them.
Thonis, or Heraklion, as it was known to the Greeks, was cited in ancient myths as a major trading post for the region.
For a long time, Heraklion in Egypt was in many stories, but had not been found until the year 2000. In India, in the year 2001, something similar happened.
The Mahabharata tells of the time Lord Vishnu built a great fortified city, Dvarka.
I wonder if they're going to get to
To
Atlantis.
be an imaginary place, and then it was discovered.
It's that's not true. It wasn't discovered. They think they found something that kind of looks like it under the ocean, but it's mostly just rocks.
I don't know if they try to draw some kind of if they try to make some kind of connection between Crete and Atlantis, or the Minoan civilization.
Yeah,
I forget. I think there was something like that.
Yeah. Something in the Mediterranean. Some weird thing. But that Indian one, they found it's like the there's Japan's Atlantis too, that they think there's
those
evidence
weird
that
like blocks underwater and stuff. Yeah,
and it's the same thing in the Indian Ocean too, that they think is this ancient Indian city
Until it was discovered by archaeologists. This lets us know that there is more information in myth
those
than
dumb
we might have
archaeologists,
thought.
frauds. And he just called the Bible myth, by the way.
On Earth that were thought to be
So
mythological.
did the flood happen or not?
The one that has inspired the most fascination and has proven the most elusive is not a city, but an entire
there we
continent.
go.
Atlantis.
Here we go.
As described by Plato in the 4th century AD, Atlantis was the home of a highly advanced civilization which mysteriously disappeared into the ocean thousands of years ago. While mainstream scholars continue to dismiss Atlantis as nothing more than a fanciful myth, there are many who believe Plato's account was based on a very real
And we would
place.
call those people crackpots.
But if Atlantis, like other formerly
And it's like, I don't mean who cares, as in I don't care about the discoveries because they're fascinating. But I mean, as far as the ancient alien theory is concerned, let's say Atlantis was a real civilization. What does it mean that in Plato's time he was talking about a highly advanced civilization? What does highly advanced mean? I mean, are we gonna find a thing under the water with find a bunch of ray guns and saucer UFOs?
Yeah, like shiny metal, like sterile rooms with like X-ray machines and laser beams.
Exactly. Or is it just gonna be a bunch of rocks and stuff?
Yeah, like this could have been their laboratory where they built spaceships. See, here it's round, and these are molds they use to cast metal. Great stuff.
Proof of extraterrestrial contact with early humans.
No, it's not.
There's Atlantis.
There it is.
Dunedin, New Zealand, February 2017. Scientists at New Zealand's top geological institute, GNS Science.
Again, they're using scientific discoveries.
Of a lost continent.
Yeah.
One that sunk into the ocean
damn
millions
dirty
of
scientists.
years ago.
Millions of years, remember
They
that.
dubbed the landmass Zealandia, as it extends directly under New Zealand. Although it is almost entirely underwater, it fits the definition of a continent, as it consists of an intact piece of crust that is distinctly different from the ocean floor and clearly separated from Australia.
This was a shocking discovery because they thought the number of continents on Earth had been basically fixed. Now this one looks like it could have been another continent where perhaps human beings dwelt.
All right. So this guy, John Brandenburg, he's saying that, again, we thought there were 7 continents and we found this rogue continent underneath the ocean near New Zealand. So again, scientists changed their mind when new evidence was presented, but that's beside the point.
Mm-hmm.
I looked into this Zealandia thing.
Zealandia.
Yeah. So he said human beings could have dwelled here, right? Nope. Human beings could not have dwelled here because it sank after breaking away from Australia 60 to 85 million years ago and was completely submerged by water 23 million years ago.
Well, that's proof that the inhabitants breathe underwater. So they were Atlanteans.
They were. God damn it.
Obviously Atlanteans. Jason
And
Momoa,
if it was,
Aquaman.
this could
is
certainly
under there.
rewrite a lot of history books.
Could this be the lost continent of Atlantis?
No.
Ancient astronaut theorists say that it is a distinct possibility.
Oh, okay.
There's an ongoing bias among scientists that anything from the ancient
This guy,
past
he has such a
must
punchable
therefore
face.
be a made-up
The
fake
hair.
story.
Oh,
myth.
the hair, dude. Cut your damn hair.
And yet, these scientists have to look at the reality that archaeological discoveries are verifying that the actual stories have merit.
What stories? That ancient aliens did something? No, you fucking idiot.
New York City,
God.
February 2017.
That's pretty amazing we were able to do this.
Giorgio Tsoukalos and Jared Collins continue their scientific investigation of a mysterious 2,000-year-old elongated
I wonder if those lines, just like those little lines, like when they capture him leaving the building and go, it's so amazing. I wonder if that's like scripted. I mean, not that it matters. It's neither here nor there.
Yeah,
But
no,
I
it
just
is.
always
It
wonder-
is. The way
yeah.
these, there's probably like 3 or 4 different takes. And yeah. Oh, yeah. All that shit's, yeah.
Almost unheard
Yeah,
of.
it's like, even that's fake.
Yeah. No, yeah. All of it's fake.
Wow.
because anthropologist Dr. Todd Disotell found this skull to be missing the sagittal suture that exists on all naturally formed human skulls. Giorgio and Jared have taken it to New York University's radiology department. There, it will be subjected to a CT scan.
A scan? Yeah, let's see what's inside.
Which should reveal whether or not the skull really is missing the suture, or if it is simply
everything
not
hinges on that
visible
suture.
to the naked eye. During the procedure, a series of computerized X-ray images are taken from
So weird.
360
They use
degrees
science.
and stacked together to form a 3D image. If any hairline evidence of the missing suture exists,
No, I'm
it
all
will
for
show
doing
up in the scan.
this stuff to these artifacts,
Looks
right?
amazing.
That's
Right.
cool. We can learn new
Isn't it
things, but
incredible?
they're bastardizing
So these are
this stuff for
surface
their own
rendered
crackpot
images to allow
theories.
you to see the skull. For the sake of comparison, we have put similar images of a actual patient.
Okay.
So you can obviously see the teeth, the orbits where the eyes would sit,
Okay.
and you can see that it's a very deformed skull.
Do you find any strange
Obviously, by the
anomalies
frickin'
besides
cone.
the shape, obviously?
Well, there's a lot that's interesting about this. There's a sagittal suture that runs across the top of the skull that I'm not seeing on this skull. It's fused. But what is confounding
two different
to me
skulls.
is you can see the sutures
Yeah, right?
in the other areas.
And the fusing of a suture, is that something where if we were to look closer, would we see a remnant of that suture?
We can look at it this way on these images. So you can see right here, there should be a sagittal suture right there, and we're not seeing it.
Where
There's
did
a
it
lot
go?
of distortion, but I'll show you, this is what a suture elsewhere would look like. So these are the sutures elsewhere.
Have you seen many skulls that have missing sutures?
I've never seen anything like this skull.
Ancient astronaut theory.
The very fact that their evidence for... Oh, here we go. Hold on.
Such as the missing
And you wonder, it's
sagittal
like maybe she just hasn't worked on any elongated skulls.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, maybe she hasn't seen these because they're
Yeah.
few and far between. But the very fact that we already discussed the suture and how the premature fusing of what they do when they bind these skulls can cause it to disappear.
Mhm.
The very fact that the evidence they're using either to prove aliens or disprove science is actually evidence against their position.
Yeah, that must cost a lot of money. An MRI. That skull probably doesn't have insurance.
You got History Channel money, son. You can afford that
Yeah,
shit.
just throw that shit
History
around.
Channel money.
fit into the accepted paradigm. And they
Oh, he just said
suggest
scientists isn't
that
good with
findings
data.
that defy conventional
doesn't-
explanation
Yeah.
often get set aside instead of being investigated.
Because they're a bunch of assholes.
St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada.
This all
Spring,
probably started because Giorgio
1970.
was like trying to hit on like a female
Researchers at
scientist
the
in a
Earth
bar,
Sciences Department
and she
at
rejected
Brock
him. He's like, "Oh, fuck science."
Receive a sample of wood that was found buried 150 feet underground on an island off Nova Scotia. After scientists run carbon dating tests on the material,
Assholes.
they place the object as being from 3,000 years in the future.
What?
Confounded,
Oh, this.
the team runs the
How does
test
that
again,
happen?
only to get the exact same results.
Since it's an organic piece of material, they were able to date it. But the dates
What the
that
hell
they
is this thing they're
received
dating again?
A piece of wood.
completely contradicted everything because it had a
Wood
date
from
of
the future.
3,000 years into the future. Well,
Maybe that
how is
wood
that
was sent
possible?
from the future to warn us about something. And we chopped it up,
How is
sampled
it
it.
that modern dating techniques can produce results that are so
It was
obviously
stuck up the
contradictory?
Terminator's ass.
Yeah, it's a
behind
splinter.
radiocarbon dating is that radioactive
It's the only
carbon
way we can
decays
get
at a
back
set
to the
rate,
past.
and you can
We
use
shove
that
wood
to
up our
date
ass.
when various animals and
required.
life forms died and how long they've been dead.
However, there are known flaws in the science.
Oh,
Inorganic
flaws in the
materials, like
science.
stone, cannot be carbon dated.
Well, what do we
And
do then?
exposure to radioactivity can alter the dates dramatically.
So that is actually true. And what happened with this particular piece of wood is from Oak Island. You know Oak Island. Apparently, some pirates buried treasure in Oak Island.
Oh,
and
okay, yeah.
people are turning that island into Swiss cheese looking for it. Well, around that area, the U.S. was testing atmospheric thermonuclear weapons.
Wow.
And so that area was bathed in
Radiation.
And yes, radiation can cause carbon dating to throw weird results at us. And that's exactly what happened with this piece of wood, is that the radiation mixed with the atoms of the tree and the carbon, and it caused it to have these weird
like a false,
results.
False reading. So once
Right.
again, I mean, this isn't even supporting the idea that aliens were involved. They're just basically trying to discredit science.
Discredit science.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because they're saying like, oh, they can't even the dating methods they use are flawed, because how can a wood be from 3,000 years in the future? So everything they date must be flawed too. Even the age of the pyramids, wink, wink, or this hammer, wink, wink.
The dating may abruptly increase because of nuclear weapons going on.
See?
It's also changed if a volcano erupts. It puts a lot of carbon dioxide in the air. But
See, it's not about aliens.
Scientists crave certainty.
This guy.
Like all human beings. Certainty and predictability. So they tend to minimize the caveats.
Even though science explains that this is what happened, either a volcano can cause this or a thermonuclear blast can cause this. They crave certainty, even though they can explain why this happens.
It's infuriating.
But if the carbon measurements can be skewed due to exposure to radiation, just
as in from the scientific journal, The Blaze.
Oh my God. Glenn Beck, that's
how
a guy you can
inaccurate
trust.
might the dating be? Perhaps answers can be found when the process is put to yet another, even more confounding test. Irvine, California, April 2017. Ancient astronaut theorist Georgios Tsoukalos is visiting the Kent
Crazy-haired
Carbon
alien
Cycle
guy.
Research Lab at the University of California to see
There's some female comic on Adam Carolla like years ago when this show first came out, talking about how she knew it was just bullshit, but she loved watching it.
Yeah.
And she had a theory that the crazier his theories got, the bigger his hairs.
It just kept growing.
Yeah.
Let me show you how this thing works. Follow me.
Ladies and gentlemen, brace yourself.
Dr.
Real
John
science is
Salmon
about to happen.
Is using accelerator mass spectrometry equipment to carbon date a sample of redwood that was
These
exposed
scientists
to
with their
radiation
fancy
during
terms.
the testing of atomic weapons in the 1950s. The process begins by sterilizing the wood chip and then exposing it to various chemical processes to remove any contamination.
Science stuff, science stuff, science
The
stuff.
material
Cool
undergoes
science
a
stuff.
combustion process and is reduced to graphite for optimal data retrieval. Finally, the graphite is sent through an accelerated mass spectrometer to measure the rate of radiocarbon decay and generate the age of the object.
Cool.
Pull up a chair. All right.
So what are we looking at here?
Okay, so this is
That's a
our
computer.
result here. This is how much radiocarbon was in the samples that we measured from that rig.
Samples.
Oh no, he's using the Mac. Probably had to
The thing
reboot.
that's strange about them is that the radiocarbon age is negative, which means, at least at face value, these are from 600 years in the future.
Really? Okay.
And the
So,
explanation
aliens?
for that has to do
Aliens
with
brought back
nuclear weapons
Well,
testing in the atmosphere.
the connection they
in
make
the 1950s
is
and 1960s.
fan-fucking-tastic.
This is amazing. In your estimation, do you think that if an
Probably my favorite
object
part of this episode
is
coming up
closer,
here.
let's say, to a nuclear testing site, that an item like that would be yielding more crazy results?
If it was really close, yes.
Okay.
So it would give you dates that would be the equivalent of tens of thousands of years in the future.
All right. So before we jump into this next section, because this next section is quite brilliant what they're doing here. Prior to this, they said scientists can't even get the dating right because they got this wood from 3,000 years in the future. So why should we believe them when they date other things? Now, he just shows up, crazy-haired alien guy shows up to this scientist here, and he shows you how they date things using radiocarbon dating. And he says this piece of sample was from 600 years in the future. And we know this because of the thermonuclear atmospheric blast, especially in Nova Scotia and around Oak Island, where they were doing testings in the 40s and the 50s. So we know that these blasts can cause anomalies in the dating methods. So on one hand, they said scientists can't even get this right, but this next section here, they're going to use the fact that thermonuclear testing can cause these anomalies to prove ancient aliens.
So they're like slapping science in the face, but trying to use science to back up their theory.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's so incredibly fascinating.
Here we go.
If any object is exposed to some type of a thermonuclear event, it changes the result of the carbon dating. So I think that it's about time for us to look at our ancient history, because what if something similar happened in our past?
Stories of ancient warfare involving the gods using sophisticated weapons can be found in numerous texts. And ancient astronaut theorists have long proposed that these stories are backed up by physical evidence that can be found throughout the world.
One
Really?
curious site that seems to indicate some kind of an atomic explosion is the very southwestern corner of Egypt, right up along the border of Libya. And that area is a sandy area, but it is
that supposed to be glass
covered
or something?
with evidence of vitrification. That's what happens when you detonate an atomic bomb in a desert area. It turns the desert into glass. And also at Mohenjo-Daro, which is on the border of Pakistan and India, were these lumps of glass that had been molten and melted, and there were skeletons that were also found that were radioactive.
All right. Let me pause it here because there's a lot to unpack. So this desert glass is said to be about 26 million years old, and we really don't know how. We know how it could be formed, but we're not sure exactly where. We don't really have a clear idea of exactly how it came to be in that particular spot of the desert in Egypt. So from what I read, it could be formed from radiative melting. So usually you'll see it when they do nuclear tests, where it will turn the sand into glass because of the intense heat. Will do that, but it also can happen from a meteorological event as well. So if a meteor large enough
I see,
slams down into the earth, it's about 26 million years ago, possibility that it did and formed this glass, which turned the sand into glass. So it's similar to a thermonuclear blast. So there's an explanation for that. Now, these radioactive skeleton is completely false. Skeptoid did an episode on this.
Oh, wow.
October 2016, episode 4 or 541. And the story about this radioactive skeletons popped up in the year 2000 on a site called KillyNet. It's a conspiracy site.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the story originated, that there's these radioactive skeletons found. And it's proof that there was an ancient atomic war that happened in this region. So these are their two evidence that the atomic alien war happened.
Atomic alien war.
Yes. Glass and these fictional radioactive skeletons.
So the evidence shows that there was some kind of atomic detonation or atomic war in our ancient history. There are suggestions that there may have been some past nuclear weapons detonation.
There you go.
And if that occurred, then the carbon dating must account for that possibility. And that would make, by the way, everything look younger in carbon dating.
So what they're saying is that our dates, say for the pyramids or something that's, say, this was 10,000 years ago or this was 4,000 years ago, is actually younger or older. It's actually older because the nuclear blast that the aliens fought each other with caused the carbon dating to bump up 2, 3, 4,000 years into the future. So you take that date and you subtract 2,000, 3,000 years, and that's the actual date. So if you say it happened 10,000 years ago, it really happened 13,000 years ago because of this phantom nuclear war they had.
Phantom nuclear war. I like that phrase too.
That's like that's a good punk band.
Yeah, definitely.
The oldest dates that can be measured by carbon dating go back to only 70,000 years ago.
Good thing that's the only dating method we use.
Of Earth's estimated 6 billion year history.
Allegedly.
Yeah,
Scientists
carbon
have come to
dating
rely
only
on the
goes back
fossil
so
record
far.
to fill in the gaps. But that too
Other than that,
has
it's
its
usually examining
limitations.
strata and stuff like that.
Now they're going to bring up the missing link fossil record to prove
Myanmar,
aliens?
Southeast Asia, December 8th, 2016. Paleontologists discover a piece of amber containing the perfectly preserved tail of a dinosaur, believed by mainstream scientists to be 99 million years old.
Or is it 99,003,000 years old?
As it reveals that not all
do the
dinosaurs
math.
were covered in scales, as they had been depicted for more than
Oh, how is this news? For years and years, hasn't it been posited that some dinosaurs had feathers?
archaeologists.
Yes. This isn't a new thing in paleontology. It's been known for decades that certain dinosaurs had feathers. And again, these guys are so fucking dumb that they don't understand that this disproves their whole thesis right here, because their whole thesis is that scientists don't change their minds or they're not open to outside evidence. But that's right. They found this preserved dinosaur tail that had feathers, and they changed their minds on what dinosaurs looked like based on this piece of evidence.
It's not like they're trying to bury the information like
oh no, dinosaurs have to have scales. Bury this
anti-feather
information.
lobby or something. Yeah.
Yes, right. That's how fucking dumb they are.
Have gotten it so wrong.
They didn't get it so wrong.
Criticisms against the fossil record.
They
are
go by the
gaps
evidence that they
in the
have,
record.
and then they change their
That
mind
is,
based on new
we can
evidence.
see what we think this animal looked like, 3 million years ago, and then we can see what we think it looked like 1 million years ago. But what happened in between?
Where's that missing link, Bill? Where's it at?
Gaps of up to 80 million years.
In between it evolved.
The fossil record is woefully incomplete.
They want the crocoduck, damn
And
it.
the process of becoming a fossil itself is extremely difficult.
Space
Vertebrate
chicken.
bones are very difficult to turn into fossils. We are these wonderful picnic lunches for a lot of different creatures. Unless you fall into a water-filled mud bath or in the ocean, leaving your bones almost anywhere is going to make sure it's never turned into a fossil.
That's actually an interesting point that I liked, because it kind of sticks it to creationists. Because creationists will often say, why aren't there more fossils?
Right.
And I'm like, because it's a kind of a difficult process.
It's extremely
Yeah.
rare and difficult. Exactly. And the fact that we have so many to begin with to piece together our ancient past is phenomenal.
Exactly.
Fossilized. This leaves room for all kinds of anomalous beings to really exist.
Anomalous beings.
Anomalous
Find
beings.
fossils of 9-foot giants and even of extraterrestrials.
No, that's
It's like, aren't dinosaurs like impressive enough? Why do you have to like?
I know, right? Like
Yeah.
they found that dinosaur in like South America that was like the biggest dinosaur that roamed the earth, and it was like, I don't know, like 2 stories tall, its femur bone or something like that. It was huge.
Insane.
It's like, come on now.
Why do you need to like daydream about
Aliens.
giants and aliens? Yeah.
Exactly.
To the notion that extraterrestrial or hybrid beings have ever existed on the planet, ancient astronaut theorists believe they may be very close to uncovering definitive proof.
Oh, I can't wait for this.
That was the Star Child skull. I've seen too many of these
Los
things.
Angeles, California, April 2017. After nearly 2 months, the results from the DNA test that was performed on a 2,000-year-old elongated skull from Paracas, Peru, are finally in. To analyze the results, Giorgio enlisted the help of Dr. Todd DeSotel.
All right, Todd, you got the results?
Yeah, and they're very, very interesting.
Los Angeles, California, April 2017.
All right, Todd, you got the results?
Yeah, and they're very, very interesting.
Giorgio Tsoukalos is online with anthropologist Dr. Todd DeSotel to receive the results of a DNA test that was performed on an elongated skull.
They did get a good, clean DNA profile from the maternally inherited DNA. So this
he holding
particular
a vape
specimen
pen?
is actually
That's what it looks
not
like.
found in the New World.
He would vape.
Not found amongst Native Americans, and it's typically found amongst Europeans and Middle Easterners. In fact, the 100% match was to a Scottish individual. This makes no sense whatsoever.
100% match this
In a
guy.
South American skull? This is all very strange.
That could mean that people from Europe got to South America, 1,500 years earlier than we currently understand now.
How do we
So-
know that this? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so that Giorgio, whatever his name is going to jump from Scottish skeleton to aliens. It's like how does a Scottish skeleton equal alien? But even that, okay, so it's a Scottish. Okay, so an ancient Central or South American skeleton with Scottish DNA. The first thing I was thinking, I'm like, mix up at the lab. I'm like, what I mean,
Contamination.
yeah,
right?
I'm like, it makes zero sense. But even the rare chance, the off chance that there was some European in the New World, centuries before we thought they were there. How does Scotland equal aliens?
Well, I think it doesn't, right? Because we're assuming that this he was able to get a decent enough sample, and we know DNA is very fragile, and it degrades over time. So we're assuming that he was able to get an accurate and consistent reading from the DNA. But what they're doing here again is that he's saying, the scientist guy is saying that if this is true, if this result is true from the skull from Peru, it would put European people in Peru 1,500 years before the commonly held knowledge that we have now.
Right.
Right. So again, it's casting doubt on what scientists know. So scientists say, well, no, this in their mind, they're saying scientists will say, no, this can't be true because it contradicts what we know as of right now that it couldn't have happened.
But what I think on top of that, though, Giorgio or whatever is going to go. It almost reminds me of the meme, like where it shows him with his hands up and it's like aliens or whatever. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens.
Right.
Because I think he's about to say that he believes the skull is alien.
Yeah, he's going to make that connection. But what you got to remember the thesis of the show here is to undermine
that
science.
Science can't be trusted.
Right. Now, if this is true, if this result is true, we don't know if this skull came from Peru. We just don't. Excuse me. In the beginning of the show, they said these skulls come from all over the world. We have examples from all over the world. So we just got to take this art dealer's word that this skull came from Peru. We don't have any other outside evidence to say that it did.
Right.
So first of all, we got to establish that to see if it came from Peru. And if it did, and this guy's result's accurate, we'll test it again to make sure that and I say scientists in general, the world.
Right.
We'll test it again to make sure his results hold up. That's how science works. If the results hold up and we place this skull in Peru 1,500 years before we commonly thought European people to be there, then we'll shift the timeline, as science does, to reflect that.
It's funny, I tried Googling this before we began talking tonight, and it was just like a landslide of bullshit pseudoscience websites.
Yep.
I couldn't find any authentic, any valid websites talking about it. So I don't know what the story is.
Yeah, we won't know. You're right. It just bounced around from pseudoscience site to pseudoscience site. And that's how these things perpetuate across the internet.
That's amazing.
Unfortunately, the condition of the sample did not yield any Y chromosome, but that's not surprising. There is between a couple hundred to a couple thousand times as much maternal DNA in every cell of the body.
So what does that mean? What have we not found out because
What does it all mean?
Well, so one, that would allow us to definitively determine
It's in the computer.
And knowing who the father was would be very, very informative. Unfortunately, we're
Who's the
missing
daddy?
that.
Send him to Maury.
Right. Do you think that a case can be made at all? And again, this is complete speculation, that perhaps it is not necessarily human. Is that a possibility?
Well, it's possible, but still, we actually don't know what this is. Since we didn't get any definitive result, obviously a scientist always wants to try to do that.
This is extraordinary.
Scottish non-human.
Seriously, a little bit of racist, isn't it?
Of something interesting.
Are Scottish people
Right.
human?
So
on
I
the next
think that
Ancient
we
Aliens?
have something here that definitely merits further investigation.
That it's worthy of study or opening up a new area of inquiry and some new hypotheses.
Therefore,
confirmed the fact that there is a mystery there. First of all, we couldn't figure out who the father is of that thing. Number two,
The thing.
it has
Call it a thing, he
European
didn't call it
DNA.
human.
Two things that make no sense, and it had a missing sagittal suture. So I do think that that is an extraterrestrial skull.
just like that. So we don't know who the father is.
It's half Scottish.
Half Scottish, and it's missing the suture. Even though we explained all that away. Never mind that. Never mind the man behind the curtain.
I'm picturing like a little green cap with a pom-pom like on top of that skull, like a Scottish hat, a little Scottish cap.
Yeah, little bagpipes. It's alien. It's alien.
Could preconceived notions concerning mankind's origins be causing scientists to overlook valuable data?
No.
Ancient astronaut theorists say yes. And
But they're crazy.
suggest that the scientific community has been too quick to find answers when they should be asking more questions.
Oh, science never asks questions.
Science has built this house. It's called the Standard Model. And unfortunately, this
Which we
house
all know
has
is
some big
bullshit.
holes in its walls, and we hang paintings over them, basically.
Like the Mona Lisa.
And we
So weird,
try to kind of
elaborate
paper those
metaphor.
over.
Yeah.
We want certainty. We want everything to fit. But new knowledge always changes that.
Yeah.
Before we take this guy too seriously here, let me give you a little background on Mr. Brandenburg. He was a plasma scientist, whatever the fuck that is. But he kind of flipped the script, and now he believes there's evidence of a thermonuclear war on Mars.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so we'll just leave that right there.
The model of thinking in modern day academia is that artifacts can't possibly exist outside of our chronological timeline. They decide it's easier to simply put the pieces in that fit and remove the pieces that don't.
Are you describing what you guys do?
Far too quick
Exactly.
to put a period at the end of the sentence. They're looking at a giant jigsaw puzzle.
A giant
with
jigsaw.
only a few pieces that are there. But
What
they're
is it
drawing
with ancient
huge
aliens?
conclusions
Seinfeld.
without
Yeah.
really seeing all the evidence. And this is a problem in trying to reconstruct our ancient history.
Science is about letting
But
the
you
evidence
said the
lead
evidence
the
hasn't been found
investigation,
yet.
drawing conclusions based upon what you find. And the findings are undeniable. We are not alone. Extraterrestrial
The light up
human-like
eye.
groups have been visiting us all
That's
along.
proof.
Yeah, right.
Are we now entering a new age of science where we will be forced to rewrite our history books?
Hobbit discovered. Yes.
Perhaps
that's
we are
another
finally
thing
getting
where we
close
change
to
our
finding
minds.
the answers to the questions that mankind has been asking for centuries. Where did we come from? Why are we here? And are we alone?
That makes it sound like like you were saying earlier, replacing God with aliens. Where did we? All the big mysteries. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Aliens.
Exactly. It's exactly what it is. It's aliens. They're creationists disguised as ancient alien theorists. All right. So, I feel like I killed more
Yeah.
brain cells with that episode than with a 6-pack of beer. My brain's kind of fried right now after watching this episode multiple times, but would you like to give some closing thoughts on what we just witnessed in all of its glory?
Well, I've just been I've been drinking rum and coke out of a Krampus mug during this whole thing, so my brain's pretty shot too. But I'll just double down and say incredibly biased and one-sided. I think it's irresponsible of something that calls itself the History Channel to publish or broadcast this type of shit. That's probably it.
Yeah. I think these guys have an axe to grind with science, but they kind of worked their formula throughout this episode. They contradict themselves at every turn. They can't even keep their own story straight throughout the entire episode. They're jumping back and forth from science is shit to, hey, this science proves our ancient alien theorists. And then they end it with the boldest of all bold claims that saying, we know we've been visited by ancient aliens. We know there's alien human hybrids. We know this, but they did not present any evidence whatsoever to support that conclusion. So it is a belief system. It is a system of belief that they have to defend no matter what, because unlike the scientific method, they don't follow a process. Like that guy said at the end, even though he wasn't talking about himself, they only pick pieces that they want to fit their puzzle they created. Any piece that doesn't fit the puzzle they created, they discard immediately because it doesn't fit. And that's what they do. That's what they've been doing for 12 seasons, and that's what they're going to continue to do. And this is so disheartening to the fact that people watch this, and it's not, I don't think it's a fringe theory in that it is in science, but as far as the populace goes, I bet you I know a few people who believe in this bullshit.
Oh yeah.
You may know a few people who entertain it to a certain degree. But there's no supporting evidence for it. There's nothing that they said in that episode besides they shit on science and they only use science to their benefit when it benefits them. That's all they do.
I agree 100%. It's like it just leaves you like flummoxed. You don't even know what.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy.
It's like, like I said in the beginning, when we did this with Finding Bigfoot, it was fun. Their guys are kind of kooky. They do weird things. They believe in weird things, right? But Bigfoot isn't so far out of the realm of possibilities that Ancient Aliens is, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of sort of get behind the idea that, yeah, maybe there's a hominid species we haven't quite discovered yet, even though it's far-fetched, but it's still within the realm of possibility. But the fact that these ancient alien crackpots just so boldly claim that what their viewpoint is true and everyone else is crazy.
Yeah, and I think like the Finding Bigfoot thing, it's kind of goofier where this is, they're trying to present it or package it more like science.
Right.
And it's a bastardization of science, and it's the History Channel pushing it,
right,
making money off of it.
Yeah, it's disheartening to say the least. But Phil, I appreciate you joining me on this journey into madness, and hopefully we both come out of it okay in the morning. We sleep it off like a bad hangover.
Exactly.
But before we head out for the episode, go ahead and let my listeners know where they can find your stuff at.
Okay, so my podcast is The Week in Doubt. You can find it on Podbean, Podbean. I had to think about that, .com. You can just go to Podbean and look for The Week in Doubt. It's also available via iTunes and Stitcher. And I'm always posting stuff on the Week in Doubt Facebook page.
Follow you on Twitter at The Week in Doubt.
Yep. And there's YouTube too. There's also a Week in Doubt YouTube channel.
There you go. I'll post all that stuff in the show notes so you can directly link to Phil from there. But thank you again for joining me, and we'll see you here next time on Paranormal Skeptic Academy. Thank you for listening to Paranormal Skeptic Academy. If you like the work that I do, please leave me a review on iTunes and Stitcher. If you want to support the show financially and receive extra content monthly, you can sign up to be a member starting at $1 a month at patreon.com/PSA or at paranormalskepticacademy.com/membership. Like the Facebook page at facebook.com/Paranormal Skeptic Academy. Follow me on Twitter at cweb619 and subscribe to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/pskepticacademy for full video versions of each episode and YouTube-only bonus content. Also, you can download each member-only episode for $1.50 at paranormalskepticacademy.com under downloads. Thank you for listening and supporting Paranormal Skeptic Academy. Schooling your favorite paranormal investigators.